attention. Let me know when you're live. We're live now. Whenever you're 7 o'clock.
Fair.
Everyone, I call to order the regular Board of Education meeting for Prospect Heights District 23 at 7 o'clock on March 8th, 2023. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Bednar. Mr. Cordanis.
Present.
Mrs. McClaney.
Present.
Mr. Nordmark.
Present.
Mr. Novak.
Here.
Mrs. Peters. Mrs. Botwinski.
Here. Okay.
Okay. Can somebody signal to our stars of the show to come on in and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Good. You can put in the front too, or a couple of rows. Yeah, you're good. Good, perfect, love it. Mateo, all right. All right, stars, whenever you're ready.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So tonight we're very excited to be joined by the Sullivan wrestling team. No. This, I am confused. This is the Sullivan musical, the cast of the musical. There are a whole bunch of them, and there's another 25 or so set design and stage crew that we want to honor and recognize as well, but we couldn't fit them in the room. And you all have been very, very busy. Can somebody share what you've been busy doing?
We've been rehearsing and singing songs and learning actions to our songs.
Good. For the musical that's called what, Bella?
Frozen Junior.
Frozen Junior. Now, you have about 3 weeks before the performance. How is it going? Are you...
It is okay, but it's not falling apart. It's okay.
Right. Good. Show business. That's... Clara?
By the way, it is not 3 weeks away. It's tomorrow.
Oh, the show is tomorrow. And is anybody nervous? Excited? A little of both? Yeah? Board members, any questions for our actors?
What has been the best part about doing the musical this year? Yeah.
I would say it's all the songs and lines that are creative and fun, and we do fun activities in between.
Awesome. Mikey, what else?
A lot of the times when you're with the cast, you make a lot of new friends in the cast that you never knew that you had.
That's awesome. I see lots of hands. Mateo?
Get to meet a lot of new people and have new experiences with the show.
Bella?
A lot of the lines are really funny.
Right. So this Frozen you speak of, is this a Shakespearean play? Who is this? Have I seen it before? It's
Yeah.
Gavita, where's it from?
It's a Disney movie.
Disney. You'll have to tell me more. I'm not
What is this Disney you speak of?
It's for little kids.
story about? How ice is made, or?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, it's about like two sisters, and then like one is magical, and then one is not, and then yeah, she gets frozen and stuff. Yeah.
Hence the name.
And all the adventures in between.
And all the adventures. Well, before we let you go, I want to offer the board one more opportunity because you actually have a special treat for us. I think
Yeah, we do.
you're gonna
Yeah.
sing a little
We're gonna
number,
just sing
a
a
little
little
ditty for us.
bit of the ending of the finale.
So before we do that, any other comments or questions from our board?
I was going to ask if there's a favorite song that you have, but maybe that's what we're hearing. Right?
Oh, we got to hear the favorite song.
Yeah.
What's your favorite song?
Me?
Yeah.
Rangers are better than people.
What's your favorite song?
Me?
Yeah, Bill.
Colder by the minute.
Emma.
First time in forever.
Okay.
Me?
Yeah.
Do you want to build a snowman?
Okay. I know that one.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Mikey.
My favorite song is Fixer Upper.
Oh, yeah, I know that one.
Wanna fix her up.
Go, what's yours?
Let it go.
Of course.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hugo?
We've had no repeats. Everybody has
Yeah,
different
different
favorite songs.
songs.
That's
That's
awesome.
awesome.
Katika, what's your favorite song?
In summer?
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
How many total songs are there?
There are all the songs from the movie and then a few new ones for the Broadway musical.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
You have a second? This is your second time. All right. What's your second favorite?
Me or?
You go ahead.
My second favorite song will probably be Hugo.
Okay.
I changed my answer. My answer is actually Hugo.
Okay. All right.
It's a funny song.
It is a funny song.
Yeah, it's a funny song.
Right.
Awesome.
No,
All right,
it's
all
a
ready?
special
Olaf is the
Broadway.
snowman.
That's Olaf.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's part of the Broadway,
Oh.
not from the movie. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
All right,
There we go.
everybody ready?
Don't know.
We're never going back. The past is in the past. Let it go, and we'll rise like the break of dawn. Let it go, the fear and cold are gone. 'Cause here we stand in the light of day. Let our true love
Thank you, Ms. Blurg and Ms.
Thank
Wessel.
you.
And there were others that helped.
Yeah,
There was-
so we also have Miss Slowick was the in charge of the stage crew, Mr.
Yep.
Anderson in charge of lights and sound, and Miss Gross in charge of set design.
Right.
Couldn't have done it without them. So
Right.
thank you guys.
And parents, we thank you for coming out, for supporting. We have a little parting gift for you as well.
Everybody go home and rest.
Eat a good breakfast in the morning.
Oh, do you want
Oh, we'll get a
Nope.
picture of them on stage.
Oh, okay, here we go. Keep going.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So great.
Thank you, parents. Thank you, Isaac.
There are there's dress rehearsal performance
Thanks,
at
Craig.
MacArthur tomorrow. There'll be a performance in front of their classmates. Unfortunately, or fortunately, the show on Friday night is way sold out. We are gonna pack the place, so that's a great thing for us to be able to put on. But unfortunately, there aren't other available tickets for Friday night. So if you're interested, feel free to stop by on Thursday.
Repeat performance Saturday.
No.
Just for you.
We'll be starting the movie.
Yeah.
Kevin, I mean, if you want to be part of Lily's entourage, I could give you a
I'd
ticket.
take Lily. Come on, Lily. We gotta sing some songs.
Moving on.
Okay, yep.
Okay. So next we have recognition of visitors and participation. At each regular and special open meeting, members of the public and district employees may comment on or ask questions of the Board of Education. If you would like to address the board, please complete the form and give it to Mrs. O'Donnell, our recording secretary. This is the form, and Michelle is over there. So we have two here. Jeff Bowes.
And Jill, they're gonna speak together.
Oh, they're going to speak
We're gonna
together.
speak together.
Okay, and Jill, and
Lysias.
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 Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's a mouthful. I know. I know. Yes.
You want to start?
Sure. So thank you for letting us come and speak tonight. We just wanted to come on behalf of, and I want to get the name right, the Citizens in Support of District 23's referendum. We've been working for a number of weeks now, kind of getting the word out, kind of passing on what was happening with the referendum, and now being the citizens that are out there kind of spreading the word and making sure that signs get put up and that postcards get sent out. So we just wanted to come and make sure that we got on record that there is a large group of people out there and motivated and who really want to see this happen. From my perspective, I am a teacher, and the lesson that I've always learned, and kind of one of my mantras, is that I'm always trying to think about, as I'm doing my job, what's best for students. While it might not always be the easiest thing for me, or the thing that I want to do the most, that is really what drives me as an educator, and I think all educators would say that and feel that way. So really, as I look at the referendum, that's what it is. All the parts of the referendum are what's best for our students. If you look at making our schools more safe and secure, if you look at offering all-day kindergarten, that just is going to be exponential in the growth that it's going to give to our students from that point on. Alleviating overcrowding, or just making more spaces for the other educators in the building who aren't necessarily the in-classroom teachers, but need those spaces as well. The facilities themselves, just making sure that they last a long time. I'm fortunate to be at a school that has amazing facilities, and I know just the ownership that students take when they feel like the facilities are there supporting them and aren't aging and are kind of staying up with the times. Along with improving the facilities, a lot of those improvements lead to more energy efficiency, which is going to save taxpayers money, and I teach environmental science, so anything that also promotes that is a win in my book. A lot of the spaces that are going to get created at Eisenhower with this provide space for after-school activities, so now we're not only enhancing kind of that daily classroom work, but what students would get to experience outside of school. And I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, but I just want to let you know we hear you and we agree with really what's been put forth with this. The last thing that I think any person living in the district should care about is our property values. And we've got to make sure that people want to move into our district, that we are protecting those property values and making it so that people aren't choosing the school district down the street because it has more to offer than what we do. So if we don't do this, we're going to be one of the only school districts around that wouldn't have full-day kindergarten. I think that could lead voters and lead home buyers other places. So ultimately, kind of this idea going back to what is best for students. Normally I'm talking about my students, and this time I'm talking about my kids as students. And my kids' friends as students and the other kids that were here. So I really think this needs to happen. Jeff is going to speak to more of the history of what's happened in the district and kind of how we got where we want to really see this happen.
First, if you guys still need a yard sign, yes, d23.org. You go there and you can just request a yard sign. They'll bring it out and put it in your yard. So please go.
Cool.
I have not seen one in your yard yet.
It will be.
I know from being a previous board member that we've gone through so many ideas on how to squeeze the budget, squeeze the most that we could, and I don't know if there's any more squeezing to do within the budget that we have. So in order to do some of these things, full-day kindergarten, security, and improving the facilities, there needs to be an influx of funds, and the referendum is the only way that we're going to do it. I don't have any more kids in the district, but I do know that property values, they will suffer if we do not make improvements, if we let the school district downgrade because of this. So it's protecting the property values for everybody, people who are retired, don't have any kids, and people that still have kids within the district. So our organization, we're out there, we're doing what we can, and we just wanted to express the fact that we are supporting the district. I've not seen a comprehensive plan like this from previously when we were on the board, so very good job in moving it forward. And I've never seen the support that we have with the parents that we have now. So it's looking good as far as I think. So.
Yeah,
That's it.
I would echo that. Yeah, there's been a really good vibe from everyone involved.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
All right.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
so much. Thank you for what you're doing.
All right. Anybody else to address the board? Okay. And next we have communications. It doesn't matter to me. Do you guys feel cramped? Do you want to move the tables?
I'm okay.
Okay.
You guys okay?
Yeah. That's fine. Absolutely.
We can move it.
No, it's
good. Oh, okay.
Okay, so March is an extremely busy month in the world of recognition. And so this month there are a number of representatives from our staff that we want to single out and thank them for their work. Our March is Music in Our Schools Month, and so first we celebrate and recognize the positive impact that music education plays in the lives of our students and our community. We extend our appreciation to all of our music educators, Garth Anderson, Karen Luhr, Isabella Giron, Megan Murray, and Sam Simpson. And we also thank our students and families for their dedication and commitment to our music programs. National School Social Work Month is also identified in the month of March, recognizing the important role that these mental health professionals play in our educational setting. And we extend our appreciation to all of our social workers, Abra Zavaduk, Megan Rieger, Rachel Curran, and Stephanie Piasecki. March is also Youth Art Month. We recognize the importance and impact of art instruction, and we thank Melinda Lyons at Eisenhower, Rachel Matthews at Ross and Sullivan, and Janet Keown at MacArthur for their dedication and passion. We invite all community members to visit the Prospect Heights Public Library to view the art displays, our art that is on display on Thursday, March 16th from 6 until 8 p.m. There is a special Meet the Artists reception, but I believe the art is on display the entire month. March is also Middle Level Education Month, and so for us, we recognize our MacArthur Middle School staff for their commitment to this special age group of students, and we thank them for their work to support our learners through what can often be a difficult time in our students' lives. Foreign Language Month is recognized this month, and we appreciate Athena Colares for her engaging instruction and introduction to the Spanish language at MacArthur as we celebrate Foreign Language Instruction Month. And if that wasn't enough, we are also excited to announce that school will be open next year, and registration for that starts on April the 4th. Registration information will be sent home, emailed home on March the 20th, and the link will be open beginning on April the 4th. We ask that families register by May 1st so that we have time to section and schedule for all of our students. Lastly, under communications, I would like to thank our parents, students, and staff who participated in the 5 Essentials survey. We are very, very close to hitting our goal of 25%. Some of our schools are over 25%, and a couple of them are just under. But we have really high participation this year, which is exciting because it allows us then to gather data and receive reports from all 3 of those segments of our stakeholder population. If we're under 20%, then we don't receive the data or the report because there's too few respondents. So this gives us the ability to compare responses from parents, from students, and staff on a number of important variables. So we thank folks for participating in that.
Setting that up as a competition between schools was a good one.
Yeah. We strategized some ways to make sure that we got that, yes.
Gamification.
The next component that we'll be asking for input on is the strategic plan survey. That's a different survey. I want to make sure folks know it's not the same. So if you completed 5 Essentials, thank you. This is a different survey. It does ask different questions. It really is looking for input into what the community would like to see in our schools over the next 5 years. This is a process that we've been going through this year with a couple of different components to it. Now we're on the input phase. We will have some parent focus groups scheduled. We have student focus groups scheduled, staff focus groups, as well as student, staff, and parent surveys to gather that input of what the community wants to see out of our schools for the next 5 years. So that will be launched this Friday in the school scene, and then we'll be reminding folks of that over the next 4 weeks or so. And those are our communication items.
Thank you. Okay, next we have committee reports, and the first one is buildings and sites. So at the last buildings and sites, we started with a discussion of the summer work at MacArthur for the HVAC Phase 2 work. MCOR, we have in the pack, no, not there, it's not this time, it's next time. The MCOR bid for the purchase of various.
The pre-purchase of the equipment.
Right.
Yeah, that's
we reviewed a bid for new landscaping service. And the forget the name of the company, I didn't put that down here. But in investigating the companies, you found that lots of good comments about them, lots of kind of the little things that, you know, making suggestions when things need to change or should be looked at. Let's see. We talked about at Ross Sullivan in the gym, we talked about the repair of the wall. It was discovered that some masonry at the ceiling in the Ross Sullivan gym was crumbling and falling to the floor. It's at the ceiling on the south wall over the office. I think that's what Mike was saying. So that all the debris was removed so that it's not a danger, immediate danger, and that will be addressed. We looked at the natural gas contract That is up this year, and Mike and Amy checked out new companies, and we currently pay 68 cents per therm, and the new rate will be 49 cents per therm, and the agreement is for 3 years. And the contract for electricity will be expiring as well, and that is to come later. We talked about preliminary schedule of work for windows, sidings, and door replacement. We're working with Archon to develop a timeline for those things. And teachers and staff will be included in the planning later after spring break. Let's see. We talked about the preliminary schedule of work for the Grodzki lower level improvements. Admin is working with Archon to regarding the revised scope of the plans for the renovation. And we looked at the overtime report for February, and there were no anomalies there. Okay. Finance did not meet this past month. Does anybody have any comments on?
Amy just
report?
gave us a kind of an
Yeah.
interim update, and then we'll get back together,
Okay.
resume next month.
Okay.
But Amy, was there anything in particular that you felt was worth bringing?
No,
forward?
just that we talked, I shared just a little bit of an update on the bid awards, and the NSSEO update, and that'll be forthcoming next month as well, so.
Okay. And next is NSSEO. And I guess the big news in NSSEO, the board met yesterday in a special meeting to vote on the candidate that was selected to replace Judy, who is retiring. So the search firm conducted numerous interviews of NSSEO administration and program managers, area member district superintendents and assistant superintendents, admin reps, and put together a profile of what everybody was looking for in this person. So based on that profile, they posted the opening, and it was a national search. They had a number of applicants. They did the first screening of applicants, and then presented us with a slate of candidates. The board interviewed the candidates, had a first round of interviews, and narrowed it down to 3. Then we interviewed those 3, and after a lengthy discussion, the candidate that was chosen is Dr. Megan Schnorr. I think I'm saying her name right. She's currently Assistant Superintendent for Educational Services in District 15. She has a bachelor's degree in special ed from ISU, a master's from Northeastern, and a doctorate in curriculum and instruction from National Louis University. She's served in various special ed capacities in districts 205 and 158, and she actually started her career as a special ed teacher in 214. So she will work with Judy in the coming months to plan a transition, and will start her position July 1st. So welcome to Dr. Schnorr. And that was the special meeting yesterday. The regular meeting was last week and started as usual with Shining Stars, one of the shining stars is a third grader who goes to minor, who is from District 23.
It's our girl.
Pardon?
It's our student. Yeah.
Yes. She was on vacation though.
She was.
So she wasn't there, but they did show
a video.
a video of her. Yes. So, they were highlighting interventions that they were doing for in regard to social emotional learning, and that was, as usual, they had a presentation that it led into a presentation on that goal as part of their continuous improvement. So they were more examples of those interventions. Let's see. Judy she kind of, usually she does a kind of an update of state and federal activities. She kind of did a pictorial review of the past year in NSSEO regarding lots of different activities and programs. The board voted on a change for the date of the June meeting to allow for NSSEO to coordinate a Special Education Leadership Academy statewide conference. NSSEO won a grant to operate that organization, so they are running the conference. Let's see what else. We voted on the proposed school calendar for next school year, voted on a plan for ESY for this summer. They did an overview of the new NSSEO website, and we voted on a plan for the unreserved fund balance, which from this past school year, which I talked about before. I think the big thing is that coming out of this, NSSEO will contract with Archon, I believe, to identify building needs and create a plan to going forward so that we know where the unreserved funds are going.
Was that what was decided? Because I know last time it was kind of tabled for the business managers were all
Right. We met. Actually, we had a meeting today, but yes,
okay.
we met.
Sorry, I didn't.
Last
I
week
was
to
just
discuss
wanted to make sure
Yeah.
that I was following
You're
the
correct.
train there. So, and that's what was agreed upon. Was
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks, Kim.
So that's NSSEO.
It's me.
Next is community relations.
Community relations. So we weren't able to meet yet. We're going to be meeting later, probably around spring break-ish time. But there is so much good stuff happening, if you know, in the life of a school. It's the springtime as we're getting ready to move through this fast-paced rush to slow down to the end of the year. As we just saw, the Sullivan Frozen Junior performance is coming fast. The PTO hosted an amazing family fun night on March 3rd. It was a lot of fun, had by all, unless you lost at bingo when you were 5 and you needed to cry about it because you didn't understand that not everyone got to win at bingo, but you had to be carried. I saw some shoes on Facebook.
Yep.
Somebody got carried out with no shoes. It was a fun night had by.
They weren't even like a pair of shoes. They were.
No, it was like one random shoe, I don't know, but it really was it was nice to all be back together, to have the kids running around, and it was just a great, it was a great time. I do know a little plug for them is pickup is Friday night for all of the raffles that people won, so at Betsy Ross. There will be a pickup from I think 3 to 5 or something for all the raffle winners.
Can we
So
cry if we didn't get a raffle?
you didn't win a raffle? I'm sorry. Somebody with my raffle ticket number won something because I don't remember anyone putting tickets in, so I'm not quite sure who did that. But that's cool. Unless Mrs. Parisi wants to do crafts with me, I guess I'll be coming and doing crafts. March 9th, that's tomorrow, is the Kindergarten Family Fitness Night and the MacArthur Band Concert. There's an orchestra concert happening right
Tonight,
now. March 10th, Friday, is the Sullivan Ellis Island Simulation. And as Don shared earlier, the sold out, oversold Frozen Junior performance. On Monday is the Sullivan Band Concert. On March 15th is the IASB Spring Meeting. That's at Wheel 21,
It's in
right?
21.
It's at London.
On Thursday the 16th is the Prospect Heights Library Meet the Artist reception. I want to give a little plug. I know it's not on here, but back to the Music Appreciation Month. I know that orchestra and band from Sullivan have been doing amazing with bringing symphony orchestra in, and Friday the 17th they're taking the kids to see like an orchestra concert performance so that the kids can actually see like music, which I think is so great to get them exposed to musicians that are doing this for fun. So March 22nd is the Building a Better D23 information session at MacArthur. March
That's the last one.
Last
right?
one.
Yeah.
The last one. March 23rd is the BPAC event at Ike. And then what we've all been waiting for, March 27th through 31st is spring break. I don't know if we've all been waiting for that, but it's coming. I also know state testing is started. The IAR is coming fast. And the science assessment for 5th and 8th graders is also on the books. April 4th is election day. And registration opens. So while you vote, also register your kids. Get a 2-for-1. April 5th is first grade literacy night. April 7th is no school. April 10th is no school, but it's a teacher institute day. April 13th is kindergarten literacy night. And April 14th is PTO kids night out. That I'm sure there will be more information shared about that soon. So lots of fun stuff happening in the next 30 days, and we're rounding out to the end of the school year. So really exciting stuff. Any questions?
When was the Ellis Island?
Ellis Island is Friday.
It's Friday. Okay. Because Linda sent us an invite to that too, right?
Yeah.
Right. Because that's really, if you have any chance to do that, I know it's tough for, but that's such a neat event.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's really cool.
And April 4th is election day.
April 4th is election day.
All right.
Registration.
And school registration.
Because we will have school next year.
We will have school
We
next
will
year.
have school next year.
It's coming.
It's important for
I
people
like
to
the
know this.
flyer.
Yeah.
It's a good flyer. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Next is the consent agenda.
So Michelle was diligent about splitting out the consent agenda, recognizing that we may not be able to get to items G and H, because I believe we need Jim present for that, because he was the only other person who was, or
there.
was the fourth person who was there. But the other portion of the agenda, items A through F, include minutes from the regular meeting and executive session on February 8th, the special meeting and executive session on February 26th, the personnel report, and the tuition reimbursement report, items A through F. Items G through H are the regular meeting and executive session on January 11th.
So, do we need to do these split out?
Bryn needs A and B taken out, right?
Okay, so,
Or you can abstain.
Abstain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we just don't have enough to approve G and H right now.
Okay.
So we would only go items A through F.
So is this consent agenda 1A through F is what I'm marking it?
Well,
Well, he just.
'cause
can't
we
do
have it-
right?
He just can't do A and B.
Yeah.
okay, so
There's only
there's a
that first.
recommended motion.
Where is
There.
that? Oh, sorry.
The first one is just A and B.
Oh,
So the
just
rest
A and
of
B.
us can do
I
it.
just don't, sorry, I
So-
just don't see the motion.
So motion to approve
Oh, I see
items A and B of the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, moved by Kevin, seconded by Brian. Roll call, please.
Mr. Cardonis,
Yes.
Mrs. McClaney,
Yes.
Mr. Nordmark,
Abstain.
Mr. Novak,
Yes.
Mrs. Bowenski.
Yes. Okay, motion passed 4-0 and one abstention. Okay. Right, then we could combine
Yeah.
the
you can
other
do C
ones.
through F.
Yeah.
So I move to approve C through F as on the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, moved by Becky, seconded by Kevin. Roll call, please.
Mr. Cardonis,
Yes.
Mrs. McClaney,
Yes.
Mr. Nordmark,
Yes.
Mr. Novak,
Yep.
Mrs. Bowenski.
Yes. Motion passed 5-0. Okay, next is the financial
Before
report.
we move to that,
Okay.
though, I
Oh,
just
yeah,
want to take
right.
a minute
Duh.
and congratulate Dr. Craig Curtis, who, with that approval, will become our next assistant superintendent for teaching and learning here in District 23. Congratulations. Craig is a friendly face. For the last 11 years has served as Ross's principal, filling the shoes of Dr. Amy Zare, who will be on to Salt Creek. We're very excited to have Craig with us. We also had a pretty extensive interview process and involved staff and administrative team in vetting our candidates and selecting Dr. Curtis. Congratulations, Craig. We're excited to have you on the team.
Thank you very much, and I am honored to accept the position. So I couldn't be more excited, and I just wanted to thank you guys, my staff and parents, and also the administrative team for everything that they've done, because I feel as if my success is due to those around me, and I just wanted to thank everyone for their support along the way. So thank you very much for having trust in me for this position, and I'm very excited for the places we will go, and hopefully I can take over right where Amy left off, because she is absolutely phenomenal, and we will miss her so much.
Congratulations, Craig.
So, next is financial report, and I think, Bryn, you had the financial report reviews?
Yeah, so for the month, for the most part, I would say regular business. I think there was the one expense, one of the larger ones was the equipment for yard work, for the most part. I think that was the big ticket item, completing that process, and then the rest of it, pretty straightforward, supplies, things of that nature, regular doing of business materials, so.
All right.
Motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Moved by Bryn, seconded by Brian. Roll call, please.
Mr. Cardonis,
Yes.
Mrs. McClaney,
Yes.
Mr. Nordmark,
Yes.
Mr. Novak,
Yes.
Mrs. Bowenski.
Yes.
Was that your first month?
First one.
Congratulations.
Good
Well
job.
done, Bryn.
And we had multiple conversations, so
We did.
thank you for your
We did.
patience and learning. Great.
I think it's a great way to learn.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay, next is superintendent's report.
Right. We're going to readjust because we have our partners with us from the Catalyst for Educational Change. Shelley Taylor's with us to share the report. There is a presentation, so we'll adjust our seating.
I'm sorry. There's like ice cold air coming down.
Just live with it.
Right.
Is there any way that we could kind of turn
Yes.
that fan off? Thank you.
From
Yeah.
like.
I think it's just because we're further.
I
Yeah,
don't feel
yeah.
below
than
to tell you the
normal.
truth. I like it.
Okay, so Brian,
Okay,
you
so
and
just
I
turn off
will-
this
you
one
two
for me and
switch
Becky.
spots.
Keep Bryn's on.
Yeah,
Pull
I'll
it short.
come closer to you. Bryn wanted to get rid of me anyway.
Yeah. I want you to be
It's in spirit of
You're right, in
Frozen
the spirit of
Junior.
Frozen, you're right. I
That's
should
it,
be
that's what it's
more
all about.
on board
Yep,
with Frozen.
yep.
So you're more an Anna than an Elsa, right? If we played that game, which one are you?
I have to move.
Yes.
Come close.
So, just to situate this report, this is the second in a series of special projects that were completed this year. As again, a part of our strategic plan process to plan for the next few years, we took some time to gather data around two specific areas. Last month I presented on the safety and security scan that was done. We worked with our local law enforcement, first responders, as well as that committee to gather feedback, gather some data, and generate some recommendations that will then lead to the strategic planning process. We're excited to have Shelley with us today. Shelley's been with us since the start of this process, a year ago almost, when we first started talking about entering into the work. The board is aware we've had equity goals. We were one of the district's main charges was not to jump into equity in word only, but to make sure that if we're going to set goals around equity, that they be more than lip service, but that they really be actionable. And I think that that has driven a lot of what we've tried to do. It's easy to put out a statement and say, yes, we're about equity, yes, we're about excellence, yes, we're about inclusion, and then not really back that up. What's more difficult is really to dive into the work and gather data. So Shelley will walk you through the report that they generated from a number of points of data. And I just again want to thank Shelley and Donzel, the partners who worked with our district and our equity task force to gather all of this and present the information to us.
Awesome. Hi everyone, Shelley Taylor. I know some of you look familiar from the process, which is wonderful. And I did actually recognize some of the students as well, because good news is students also gave voice to the report. I know you have the full 17-page report, and I promise I'm not going to bore you tonight with like reading 17 pages to you, which is why I have some slides. Who's control?
Christian is.
Thank you. Okay, good. So I know who to beg. I just have some slides just as some guide, but I really want this to be a dialogue. I know ultimately you probably just want to say, okay, synthesize. What is it like? What did you learn? What do we need to hear? So that's where I'm going to kind of guide us tonight, with knowing that backing it up is 17 pages of entertaining reading for your pleasure later, all in there, no worries, it's there. Okay, go ahead and can you think? So just the overall purpose, as Don mentioned, and CEC's process is very similar in that we take the idea around equity and excellence pretty seriously, and that this isn't something that you just kind of haphazardly walk into, but rather really looking at indicators of equitable programming and processes to really meet the needs of all students is really what our overarching purpose is. So we really focus on current successes, and we really like to take asset base. So you're going to see throughout the report indicators of where we definitely saw some great strides and some great successes, and then of course the climate and tone amongst all that were part of the process, and really then leads us to where are the opportunities for improvement. So that was really what we focus on. Very similar, and I even heard tonight in some of the other presentation pieces that were talked about during your meeting, same idea around focus groups, survey, and can you go to the next slide for me so we can actually see the data on it? So we did have 10 focus groups. Couple people were a part of that I've noticed in the room, which had just over 100 participants. You can see the breakdown of who were involved in those. There was also a school community questionnaire. Some of you may have filled that out. You may recall that. All of the questions in the focus groups information come from a taxonomy where it really looks at layers within a school system. I bet you didn't know this, but school systems are complex. Of course you know this, right? I mean, there's so many layers. And so when you're talking about equity and excellence, it's like, where are we talking? And which part are we talking about? And I sometimes call it, sometimes you start pulling one thread and it's like, okay, but then it's here and it's here and it's all over the place. So we did use a taxonomy that looks at 5 specific layers and levels within a system that can then start to help answer, where do we start on this journey of equity? Where we have some strong assets and where might we want to continue to push on? So the report is designed that way. I think it's like page 3 or 4. It kind of describes each of those particular levels. But do know, if you did fill out the questionnaire or were part of the focus groups, that's where all of those questions came from. And then once we took all of that information, we started to align it into some key recommendations for you all, and like where we see could be some opportunity. So that's what I'm going to share with you tonight, but I'm going to pause a little bit before I jump into that. Does anyone want any more clarity on the process or how we kind of went about that? Anything that you want me to clarify before I then start jumping into recommendations? I don't want to go too fast. Okay, all right. So yeah, go ahead, thanks. All right, so the report is divided into, and we always do this, we divide it into 2 sections. One would be what we call priority recommendations. And the priority recommendations are really designed at the district leadership level. So these are things that we can see become the larger bedrocks for a system to really be in charge of moving. So these would become your school board recommendations as well as your district leadership recommendations. And so from all of our process, we came up with 4 for you, 3, and then there'll be one more in another slide. We don't need to get there yet, I'll go through them. But first starting with, and by the way, in the report, if you wanna know, it's page 7 has a lot of text, okay? So I narrowed the text for you, but page 7 really has them there. So first would be those equity-related standards. I heard Don mention at the very beginning of teeing this off is, I can already tell from having the pleasure of listening and spending time with your community that you do have priorities, that you are looking at working on your equity journey. So really, for you all at the district level and the board level, to set key principles and values, once you know what those are. Here's our key values that then we benchmark everything against. So if we believe this, how do we make sure that all of our decisions, all of our practices then line up against that? That's really one of the best recommendations when you're ready to make some of those strong statements that can be out there, which then of course then lead to the last one, which I'm going to say is you have to have measurable outcomes. If you don't know this, DEI, so diversity, equity, and inclusion, is like an $8 billion industry right now. There's a lot of ways you can spend money on DEI. The question is, if it was just that we had good ideas and good intentions, we should have seen change. But that's not really happening right now. I mean, we've seen a lot happen, and then there's a lot that still needs to happen in our country, not just in education, but in a lot of different industries. And the recommendation is really the things that get measured, get done. And so if you put some benchmarks and measurable outcomes, this will tie to your strategic plan out there, then you know you're going to start to invest in those particular pieces that are going to move that. But it has to really be around what are your principles, what are your values, where are you going to benchmark those, and how are you going to have measurable outcomes. These line up very nicely to strategic planning. One thing I do want to just bring out there, and I know we have probably all seen in the news, the sensationalization of sometimes when these types of topics come up. One thing to remember is that to really reduce blame on people or any type of person around when we talk about equity issues, that in fact it's issues, and schools in itself are inherently inequitable, and so it's really systematic pieces that we need to be focused on and not so much about the people, so avoiding any kind of blame. Okay, so that's the big one, right? I think you guys know that, just kind of double down in on it. The second one then is continue your initiatives. They were clear. We heard them throughout all of the stakeholders we talked to. We could see evidence of that in the survey responses that came back. So continue your current efforts, but to also deepen, advance, and expand them. One thing to keep in mind is sometimes there's a misunderstanding that equity means race. There's actually 16 dimensions of identity, and we need to move beyond just the surface level of some of those pieces, but really kind of dig deep into all of the dimensions of identity. And so you could hear that like, oh yeah, we have a very diverse community. That's great, that's one, but now let's get down a little bit deeper and get to know each other throughout all 16 dimensions. To also make sure that there's culturally and linguistically responsive teaching practices that mirror that. Again, not just that surface piece, but kind of digging in a little bit deeper. And of course, expanding the SEL and mental health for students. This, by the way, is something that is just pervasive across the country. We're just in a different world, and students definitely have needs that need to be addressed. The third one then is prioritizing belonging. Belonging is such an important aspect of this, where everyone sees themselves as part of the environment, making sure that every single school building has that supportive environment. I can tell you just as a visitor, you can walk into a building and you can feel whether it's warm and welcoming just from the time you step foot in the door. This is true for any person that walks in. Do all parents, students, and community feel they belong here? Or do they feel there's some invisible walls that are up? And then of course, I will say that there are, and we did hear of microaggressions within the school communities. And this was across all, including students. Certainly were reported there. Not uncommon in our society right now, so I do need to bring that forward. It's there, which means, okay, then let's just make sure we do something about that and we call it out. Okay, before we get to the last one, because these are here on the slide, does anyone want me to clarify anything or want to even, does it spark dialogue between all of you as well, not just questions for me?
Could you expand on the last item?
Yeah, there were across the different interest groups that we spoke to, so we spoke to all stakeholders. There were comments made, and keep in mind that the questions are designed specifically not to they're not leading questions. We're not trying to guide people to tell us things we want to hear, but rather, especially when the question around, do you feel safe, both physically and emotionally, when you're at school or in the school setting. It's interesting because all interest groups brought up some type of things that don't make them feel comfortable. And so when we talk about that, and I don't use the term microaggression like a negative or a contrived way, but it's really more of like people felt in some way that they weren't always respected, they were not always taken into consideration. Either they're all 16 dimensions of their identity were not taken into consideration. And we'll get into some of the levels later. Students in particular reported bullying and harassment.
That's what I would immediately jump to when I read microaggressions.
Yeah.
But you're saying it's also potentially just lack of respect for certain aspects of how they expect to be treated.
Yeah, and even lack of even understanding things. So there were some reporting of comments made by others that they felt were not cruel, not meaning to be cruel, but really uninformed, that were in some ways not very sensitive to who they are. So again, not that people, and I will tell you, for the majority of all of the stakeholders love this community, feel very, supported by folks, and it was all in very positive ways, but there were definitely across every single stakeholder. So those, and I will tell you, it wasn't like it was huge, but I'm gonna tell you, any is a problem because that can start to create, leans in other ways. The other thing too is sometimes, even when there are some pockets of it, the efforts around equity and SEL and belonging feel contrived. Like, okay, that works for some, but everyone's ignoring the issues over here. So it can sometimes backfire a little bit if you do have little pockets that exist in the community.
Thank you.
Was that helpful?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anyone else?
I thought, and you may get to this in your presentation, but the charts with the percentages and breaking them out in the different stakeholders, to me, some of them were shocking.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm really glad that we've done this.
Yeah. And one of the things I want you to know is that the survey questions, you own, like you have that. So Chris, I'm sure, took painstaking time. we all owe Chris a big thank you. But it was purposeful because then if you want to run those same questions, so back to, remember I said, set measurable outcomes. If you want to start to see some change, you have at least some beginning pre-data to start to say, okay, where did we go from here? Yeah.
I just want to say and qualify that, by shocking, I don't mean like, things are terrible.
Oh.
They're just, they weren't what I would have expected to see.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes, again, and sometimes I'm a little surprised too to see some of them, sometimes higher than I would have thought or lower than, sometimes you're not really sure. What's really interesting and what I really look at when you get a chance to look at the data is I usually look at, is there a significant gap between certain interest groups, right? That's also very interesting data.
Right.
To say, oh, wow, maybe, and again, that's where communication often, is there a miscommunication, or are we misunderstanding definitions of things? Are we not understanding what's happening here? I think that brings some really interesting, rich dialogue too. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Okay, we're ready to go to the fourth one then. So the fourth one, I will tell you, I think is a really important one to actually fully achieve what likely will become priorities or high interests, which is to really advance modern learning, increasing these opportunities. What I found really fascinating with your data set was the definition of challenge and challenging curriculum. It was still pretty narrow into traditional programming. That challenge means that an honors class or an advanced class versus challenge being across for everybody, which definitely signals quite a traditional curriculum and academic experience versus where we have students, and we'll say too, when we ask some of the questions around students discovering their passions and goals, that was interesting. Like, what do you mean? Well, and then it often turned to, and we'll get to this, your amazing after-school programming, or it became, I heard, like the what is it, the Statue of Liberty, they became projects, right? They became projects or field trips, but they weren't actually the learning components. This, I think, is a challenge for all American public education right now, is to how do we go from the traditional programming to something that fits more of that modern piece. I do think for you all as a school board to really think about, it will take the agreement at this level to unlock that box of traditional education. And so I do think it's going to be some interesting dialogue here to say to what degree is this part of our belief system and where we can educate all kids in the same manner and all have challenge, and not necessarily put them into you belong here, you belong here, you belong here, into these little increments, which, again, this is why I've mentioned before, our school systems are inherently inequitable. They were designed to sort and select. So we shouldn't be shocked that we're having trouble getting out of sorting and selecting. Like, that's why they were there in the first place. So, you know, part of that is then to say it is going to require a push on the modern learning. What does that really mean, and what does that really look like?
That's not a shift just in here. That's
Oh.
a shift
Oh, yeah.
out there.
Yes, for sure. But why I bring this forward is because it does come with your directives.
Right.
And it does come with your support. And often schools, if you take a look at any school system or school that has tried to push in a modern direction, and somehow what took it down was not the full community, board, teachers, and administrators all being together understanding that. Those who've been able to move that forward, they're all together with that, and it's part of, yes, we know we need to do this. Yeah. Okay. Questions? Those are the big priority recommendations, right? So to get those high equity and excellence in your school system through, those from what we heard would be the priorities. Now we're gonna go into the levels. Each of the taxonomy in each of my slides will explain a little bit about the level, and then I'll give you specifics. These recommendations in the report really become then, how do the buildings at the building level make this happen based on the taxonomy? So the first level of the taxonomy is just physical integration. How are we all broadening our lenses and integrating and including everybody? So first is really increase efforts to build that integrated experience for students and community. We heard just great examples. I would say Heritage Night was the one that came up across the board. So it would really be increasing those types of efforts to build those experiences. And what that really does is it starts to remove invisible walls between stakeholders. And also it can integrate all of those 16 dimensions of identity. So how do you kind of take an example of Heritage Night, but really how do we make that part of just how everyone experiences schooling in this district? Fully ensure full integration, diversity, and inclusion within those specialized courses and extracurricular activities. So how can that happen? I think you guys have done a really nice job thus far, but there still are some disparities, right? So then where do we start to address where some of those disparities are? And consider reframing the language and tone around programming and placement. I will tell you, repeatedly I heard this from folks when they make comments, is it's the language around perception. For example, oh, my kid wasn't low enough to qualify, so therefore I'm not getting. Again, these become, that's just one example, right, of people in your system putting themselves in those boxes, right? And I will tell, the students said it repeatedly too. I heard them repeatedly say things like, oh, I'm in advanced classes, or we are, like, if you're in low, or like they were using terminology that I think could be reframed to even give them their own image of themselves as belonging. And I think sometimes that happens and we don't even realize that we ourselves are using language that feels deficit versus asset-based. So I think there's ways to kind of listen for that and kind of move that, because I will say that did come up quite a bit when we were listening to the focus groups. Okay. That's level 1. Level 2, then we move on to then social emotional engagement. This is that welcoming climate, safety, restorative practices. This is where I will say, this is, Kevin, where that student bullying and harassment came up. So definitely address the student-to-student conflict that existed. In a couple of the sessions, even when we said, if you were if you could be the superintendent, what would be the first thing you would fix? Like, and they did say bullying. So, which tells you it's there. Now, how do they define it? That's going to be part of the wondering, right? And I know that even came up the difference between, is it harassment or is it bullying? And again, we could say, is it inside, outside? The problem is if it's here, this is their community, And so really having kids talk through what does that really mean, how do we address those pieces. Fully implement the social emotional curriculum to meet the elevated emotional and mental health needs of students post-COVID. I think it's just continuing down that. I will say, everybody hands down said second step. Even I told Don, I was like, you guys have had that. He's like, this is our first year. I was like, well, hey, great job. So all I have to say is great job, because it was absolutely repeated. But we also heard that there's still more work to be done, so that it's really getting into solving some of the issues versus some of the surface level pieces. And then ensure more consistency and discipline across all schools and classrooms. This was in fact one of the lower, if you look at the data, it was definitely skewed one of the lowest in terms of having that fully implemented. So I think it's, again, consistency, and I will just hone in on the word discipline and that last bullet point. Discipline is a teaching stance. It's every misbehavior is a wonderful opportunity to teach and learn. It's not, oh, you did something wrong, you should be punished. These are not the same concepts, and I think that then is where there needs to be a little more, and I bet consistency and why it scored a little low is often there's a misunderstanding in the mindset of all adults on what that means when we're talking about that. And the other thing too is restorative disciplinary practices does require a full cycle of, if you make a wrong, you make it right. And did I give time to make my wrong a right? And those who have been impacted, we need to address that. Sometimes in schools we just haven't enough time to make all that happen. So making sure that that does really become part of that. Okay, before I move on, any questions?
Not to create a rabbit hole.
Yes.
But with the student-to-student conflict,
yep.
Did you run into or cross data where there was student-staff conflict?
We didn't probe on that one.
Okay.
And I didn't hear that. The only when we get into instructional pieces, students did comment on the instructional pieces in terms of like whether teachers had high expectations for them and how they sort of looked at them instructionally, but not anything in that harassment, bullying area.
Got it.
And it wasn't reported. So, okay. I mean, because keep in mind, our questions are pretty open, like, do you feel safe?
Yep.
So they could have reported anything at that point. It wasn't like, it's not a leading question, do you feel safe with your teachers, you know? So we don't do that kind of a thing. And I didn't even say, do you feel like you're being bullied? Like, and we purposely don't use the term bully. And so if you were part of some of the sessions, it's funny, sometimes people go, I don't know what you mean. Like, what do you mean? And I'm like, okay, what's good? You don't know what I mean. Like, sometimes it's like, great, but I don't want to give people what it is because we're waiting to hear what they bring forward. So students didn't bring that forward at all.
To your point, Bryn, could the discrepancy on students' perception of how discipline is maybe not equal?
Right.
Maybe that suggests something.
It could be, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, let's go to
One of
level
the things
3.
just on the discipline thing, it just felt like the teachers felt like that it was not being implemented consistently, that was the
That's
biggest
true
number,
too,
and I
yeah.
feel like that's an area that we need to make sure that we better understand.
And I don't know this to be true because this would require you to go back to ask some follow-up questions, but when I've worked with some staff and why I pointed out the difference between discipline and I use the term punishment, is sometimes even within staff, there is a misunderstanding of discipline versus punishment. Sometimes what ends up happening and why there's inconsistencies is a teacher sends a student down to the office, the dean, whoever, to deal with an infraction. And then the student is returned, and there's no understanding of what happened. Sometimes there's assumptions being made on what did or didn't happen. And so sometimes the teachers feel there's an inconsistency. I don't know what happened, I don't know. And sometimes it's a miscommunication of what went on, and or a misunderstanding of what they wanted the outcome to be. So if there was like, I wanted the student to get a referral or get a after school, whatever, you know, but somebody else was left to handle that there may be a disconnect there. So sometimes it's kind of bringing that together as well.
I also think you have a different, like you have layers of generations of teacher that handle things differently.
Right.
So I was curious in the data when I looked at that, like from a staff standpoint, you might have 3 generations minimum, and they've grown up educating different ways along the way. So,
yeah.
like interpretations all over the board, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I think
of that.
too, right? Like the type of teacher, like how many, like I handle it all in my classroom, so I feel like I think it's just that really, like, it also depends on, did I send them to the office expecting them to get the hammer, not understanding that the restorative process takes time or multiple reiterations, right? Or maybe not even knowing what's going on with that kid that the social worker
Right.
was able to provide
Right.
information for.
And so part of that then becomes, how do you interrupt that? Because, and also ensure that everyone understands those pieces. Now I will tell you, it is best practice to use more responsive, restorative discipline practices. Again, you can punish and punish and punish all day long. We also have Senate Bill 100 that says you can't just suspend and you can't do those things. So legally, you can't also just overly punish in some way. So you're going to have to put some of those things legally in place anyway. I will tell you, I know that from being a classroom teacher myself, it's the thing that works. Especially, I've been in EDBD, 8th grade classroom. I mean, you can punish all day long. They will fight you right back. You know, you got to come at it a different way. It's not as effective in the long run. It feels good maybe in the moment, but it's not. And again, discipline is a teaching stance. And back to what degree are we allowing that teaching to happen? It's hard to say, I know, especially with some middle school students, because, by the way, middle school students are designed to balk the system. Like, that's how they come. And again, you have to just, sometimes they'd be like, okay, thank you for allowing me to teach you something new today and how to be a good person, you know, but like, sometimes you just don't want to say that. But right, it does take a lot to kind of get there, but it is a mindset. So sometimes the perception that there's inconsistency is sometimes really also a difference in philosophy and a difference in understanding of what's happening. So I think that is definitely a rich area to kind of dive into.
Luckily, this is actually one of our largest committees this year. Is that we have a huge committee that is talking just about not only the behaviors observed, but also what are some of the responses to those behaviors, whether classroom managed or office managed, and the different levels. So all of the schools have team members as part of this team, and then even before that, before the behaviors happen, what are some of the preventative measures so that, you know, we stop this as much as possible, and then when the behaviors or misbehaviors occur, we have a more consistent response.
And these also model for students to how to treat student to student, which then also is a sub of then the bullying and the harass. Like, if I have a better model of how I handle, like if I made a wrong and I have to make it right, and I talk about how I've impacted someone else and I do something about it, then hopefully I can transfer that also and when I interact on the playground or, you know, whenever that might be as well. Okay.
Is there like a raw data? So I mean, just like the ones that we're is there a data set that breaks stuff down more like by school?
We
Or
did
there
not
any-
collect it purposely by school.
Okay.
You could, so like I said, you have all the probes that we used. It could be broken down by school. I don't like to isolate certain groups, you know, in this initial one that makes people feel uncomfortable. But I think that was probably your next step in terms of, let's see if we really want to pick a couple ideas here or things we're most concerned about. I think maybe you would want to start looking at exactly where those might be. And I don't know if you've done PBIS in the past where you kind of know exactly where the infractions are, and so sometimes you can get down to even like month by month, what are the specific outbursts that are happening at the time. You can even get that detailed.
Locations.
Yeah, location and all of that, right?
It's
Exactly. Spring.
February.
February.
Longest month of the year.
Okay, let's go on to level 3. So level 3, this now moves into the academics, the learning components. And so notice in this taxonomy, when we talk about equity, remember I mentioned school systems are complex. The first 2 levels are really about that belonging and the social emotional pieces. Now we're getting into the learning component. So this is really access to learning opportunities, support, and human and social capital. So in these probes, the recommendations we have here is really equalizing the sectioning and placement process for learning programs and opportunities where any disparities exist. So really kind of expanding access to remove any unintentional inequities. And I'm just going to tell you, this one is really hard with schools. Back to schools were originally designed to sort and select anyway. So it's really hard sometimes to start to remove those, but that's where I will tell you it's any sort of directive on what we believe in trying to offer learning opportunities for kids is going to be really important, and it often starts here in this room. Again, address teacher mindset and variances as it relates to beliefs on students' abilities and aptitudes. Just like with discipline or punishment, to what degree do all of our staff understand and truly believe on the abilities and aptitudes of students? Ensuring that teachers, and that's the wrong word, they're actively help all students to reach those expectations. There's great studies out there that show if you put a group of kids together and tell a teacher, oh, you've got the gifted class, that the teacher actually treats that class in a very different way than if you say, oh, you've got a different type of class, the low class. Like again, notice how I'm using these terms. These are terms that get tossed around. They can be debilitating for the mindset of the adults and the students. So really kind of thinking to what degree that's really there. And identify solutions to help eliminate any barriers, no matter how small, which limit opportunities for all students to participate in those extracurricular offerings. I will tell you, hands down, everyone talked about how much they love those. I know that that's hard to do, but it seemed like a really great offering. And it also, what's really nice about after school activities is you can have cross grade, you can have you can have kids doing, like it sort of allows for that, believe it or not, more of that modern learning that we talked about in that 4th recommendation, priority recommendation. So really, to what degree can you kind of double down on that?
Those kids today, confirmed it.
Yeah.
They said,
For
we got
sure.
to meet kids that we didn't know.
Right.
Correct. And I will tell you that's, and I know this sounds scary, but that is one of the interesting things if you look at more innovation is to really mix ages of kids in learning experiences. There's nothing that says they have to stay in their little, like, this is 2nd grade, this is 3rd grade. Like, there's no magic there. That's just how the system was built originally because it was efficient. If that's not our goal now, we could look at other ways of doing that. But again, that, like I said, that's some big stuff. And it can happen if a system wants that. That means you have to have everybody with you. Or again, offering those types of things where they're getting those experiences, not even just after school, but it could be also during the school day.
I think to your point though, this is system, not district.
Correct.
I mean, this is how we report to the government. This is the entire system.
Yeah.
Hard to buck some of those requirements.
It is. And there you do have local, I mean the good news is in Illinois you do have quite a bit of local control. There's certain things you have to meet, and then there's other things you have some flexibility on. I will tell you, you have to have everybody with you though. If your community is not with you, if the school board's not with you, admin's not with you, you know, teachers are not with you, you're going to have a hard time. You're going to go right back to default, right? Which is often where school systems get trapped. Okay, level 4 then moves us into instructional excellence. This again is really how people are experiencing your current level of instruction in classrooms. So the 3 recommendations here are expand and ensure consistency in adaptive instructional practices that are intended to close those knowledge gaps and non-cognitive gaps, so SEL or executive functioning or whatever, that hinder academic success. So we heard that there are bright spots going on. What we did hear is that it's not as consistent. So a lot of it was, well, depending on the teacher you get, or depending on which class, or depending on whatever. So it's sort of like there are bright spots, but how do you build more of that consistency so everyone is experiencing that? Improve the degree to which parents experience high-level partnership around learning and skill building with faculty. Just so you know, there was a ton of great comments around the communication between school and home, for sure. This is really taking this a little bit further, is parents really should be integrated into the process of side-by-side partnership. How are parents working with? I often look at it as, you know, we're co-parenting, right? I mean, we kind of are co-parenting here, right? Like, it is a side-by-side, which means that we need to view each other as that. And then, of course, reduce the variance between teacher classroom instructional experiences through those professional learnings and collaboration. So back to eliminating differences from classroom to classroom by really increasing the consistency in approach and quality of the student experience. Okay, our last level is that highest level of this modern learning type piece, which is to have those engaged and inspired learners. To be quite honest, student voice and aspirations and students self-directing their learning. Even kindergartners can do this, is what I want you to know. And it is amazing how when you say, maybe we should ask the kids what they think about what they want or what they think about these things. It's amazing what you end up with. So extend learning really beyond the school walls. Heard again, lots of great comments about field trips or special type experiences, but how do you really reach beyond that to bring that culture of District 23 into the classrooms? Students really learning through their interests, skills, and aspirations while widening the classroom. It doesn't just have to be just what's here in this book called the Curriculum Guide, but where else are we extending their learning? Capitalize on the current student leadership successes. Hands down, I will tell you, I do not always get the amazing comments on these probes when I say, to what extent, where do students have leadership? And I was floored at how much you guys have. So you all should be really quite proud. And so capitalize on that. My recommendation here would be establish policies or practices that guarantee each and every student will experience leadership and decision making as part of their school journey. I mean, it's there. The question is every kid getting it? That's my question for you all. And increasing the enrichment programs in collaboration with those beyond the school staff to provide more personalized and inspired learning for all students. There's nothing better than bringing, and I'm using this term specifically, elders into and part of learning for students to expand their cultural experience. And I'm going to tell you, you have a rich community. The question is, how do you make that happen? It's not that you necessarily have to, and I know there's a lot of conversation in the state around hiring more diverse workforces. Maybe you can't find that, but you got teachers all around this community. And so how do we kind of work together to bring that in and really kind of capitalize on those pieces? Again, there's nothing better than seeing the inside out and having kids and different generations work together around learning. It's amazing what kinds of things can happen. Okay, so that, I have one more slide. Those are all of the recommendations, minus I want to just mention a couple things, and I think you guys already believe in this because I heard you mention this. Implementation is key. I always say all good ideas in education die on implementation. That was a great idea. Oh, we just didn't implement it right. It's pretty much what is that hamster wheel you hear about in education. So, couple key things. You have so many assets. Keep it asset-based. Leverage what is going well to keep doing that improvement. Collaborative. You have to do it together. So really get that collective action and continue to listen and learn from one another. And then prioritize. Pick a few key things you can start on now. Codify that. And most especially, I'm going to say it again, what gets measured gets done. And I mean that in a positive way. So back to, let's start to see this change happen. Let's see how many. Like, can we get every single kid with a leadership opportunity? Like, those exciting numbers, those are the types of measurements and accountability that get everybody really excited. Okay, questions? You can follow up with the 17 pages of language, but I hopefully made it come to life.
Thank you.
Yes.
Awesome.
Great. Wonderful. Okay. Thank you
Thank
guys.
you very much. Appreciate it.
Yes.
We have at our upcoming Institute Day an opportunity where we'll sort of reflect with staff about the safety and security audit as well as this equity and excellence audit as part of our strategic plan. So all of the data that we're gathering and the feedback and recommendations, we don't want them to be seen as add-ons or after the fact. We're going to have our strategic plan, and then we're also going to do some equity stuff. We want that all well integrated into what we're looking at for the next 5 years. So thanks again to Shelley for and her team for pulling this together, and to all of the people who participated in the survey and focus groups. All right. You want to move the? We'll move these tables now.
Oh,
just scooch our tables left.
how you doing there, buddy?
Left and down. South.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, you're getting good, Mom?
Oh, I just.
Look who you are, too.
We're a little off in here.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, so good.
Such a great
I think you need to.
No, it's me.
There we go.
Is the temperature better for you guys?
Oh, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Instant reconfiguration.
Yeah, that was, yeah, it's great with this kind of posture.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is an informational update at the conclusion of each trimester. The administrative team reviews the strategic plan and kind of gives an update. Gives an update to the progress toward our plan goals. So that is the report that was included. And then we also provide at your place a 18-month look ahead. It's one of the crazy parts about the governance level. I think, when we're still so stuck in the day-to-day, and yet our charge is to be mindful of July of 2024 and what's on the plate and how do we get there. So provide this again just as a kind of a template of what we do in the areas of strategic planning, financial planning, curriculum planning, labor relations, and facilities. Just a brief update also on our Building a Better D23 campaign. Amy and I presented at the Prospect Heights City Council meeting on February 27th. That is running on public access station for those that are able to see that, and that will continue. We had 2 more informational sessions this week on March the 6th, one at 10 a.m. and one at 6 p.m. And as was mentioned earlier, we have one more at 6 p.m. on March the 22nd.
How was attendance at the last 2?
A handful. Yeah, a handful at each.
what was the type of feedback you received?
The morning was more mixed. The evening one was pretty supportive overall. In your packet was, or in your folder is a sample of one of the communication pieces that the committee, the community committee had provided, and you should have received at home the trifold mailing that was sent out. We're working on the Community Connections newsletter that is to be printed the end of this week and hit mailboxes sometime next. And then there will be one more communication regarding the reminder of voting and highlighting the referendum plan to hit homes that week of spring break, right before the election. Next we have an action item. This is the window of time where we're required to, if there are any reductions of force or any recommendations for non-renewal, that we need to bring that forward so that we have, we meet the timeline. So there is a recommendation for non-renewal in the packet of one of our faculty, identified in Exhibit 1. Are there any questions or discussion?
Okay, can I have a motion then?
I move to approve the resolution as presented.
I'll second.
Moved by Becky, seconded by Mary Lynn. Roll call, please.
Mr. Cardonis?
Yes.
Mrs. McClaney?
Yes.
Mr. Nordmark?
Yes.
Mr. Novak?
Yeah.
Mrs. Peters?
Yes.
Mrs. Butwinski?
Yes, motion carries 6-0.
The next item up for discussion is the preliminary staffing proposal for 2022-23. This.
23-24.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do I have the wrong year down there?
No.
Oh, I just said the wrong thing. Sorry. This is a process that is ongoing, actually starts in November when we get our initial enrollment data, and that gives us a sense of where our projected enrollment is going to go. We run that through the needs for sectioning as well as program enhancements. And so presented tonight for your consideration, we would take action on the final plan in April. I'll just walk through the kind of high level of some of the components of the plan. We're looking at a reduction of 2 core teachers at MacArthur in 6th grade. Reminder, our middle school block schedule requires that even number of sections so that we have the ability to maintain that kind of structure, and that requires then 6 and 8 sections. So we were able to reduce 2 sections there and still fit within our class size guidelines. Overall, our class sizes are going to be within the guideline ranges. Currently, we're watching 4th grade. It's high right now. We will have to identify once we start seeing the actual enrollment numbers come in. We'll have to see what our move-ins and move-outs look like. As we've done in the past, we maintain a contingency for additional staffing, but at this time did not feel it prudent to make that recommendation until after we start seeing the enrollment numbers start coming in.
What are our numbers for, is this the guideline at the bottom here? That's what it looks like, right?
Yes.
So it is 24 to 27
Yeah.
is the guideline for 6 to 8.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. We're proposing 2 additional staff positions with the title of ESL teacher. the purpose for those would be to specifically target services for newcomers. I haven't had the opportunity to talk to Jackie in the last few weeks about this, but before winter break, or at the midpoint of the year, we had already received 35 newcomers, and these are students who are new to schools in the United States. And that's not a new thing for us, but certainly that's a much higher number than we've had. And so I think it's also not seemingly going to be a blip. Looks like it's going to become more of a consistent pattern, at least for the near future. So part of the gap we have in terms of service provision is direct literacy and English instruction for newcomers. We're looking at these two positions, one being split across K through 5, one being housed at MacArthur, 6 through 8, with responsibilities for direct instruction of our newcomer students, coordination of access testing, push-in support for other English learner students, development of professional development activities, support for our BPAC program, as well as helping to streamline some of the translation services that we know we need to do a better job at overall. We're looking at those 2 FTE being a swap out for the 2 that are reduced core teachers at MacArthur. As we've done a number of times in the past, as we're looking at building our own capacity, the internal strength of our team to provide behavioral coaching has continued to grow, and so we're looking at a reduction in purchase service and adding a 0.5 sales/behavioral coach position that would allow us to bring those services in-house. We have a couple of increases to library aides.
For the NSSEO services, what are we spending for that this school year?
Well, it's one of the line items. Go ahead.
I don't know how much it does off the top of my head,
Oh.
but it's a 0.3 FTE that we purchase from them, so.
And we pay them.
So the
It's pretty
differentials.
substantial.
Well, it's a 0.2 FTE, but our purchase service through them is much higher than what we would pay for ourselves. So it was in essence a wash in terms of dollar, but I don't know off the top of my head either.
Okay. But then is this increasing an existing half person to get somebody to full time?
Yeah, so
Okay.
we have somebody who's currently doing coaching for the SAIL program, so we could make that's only a part-time position, so we could increase that to a full-time and make it a whole.
Yeah. But can that person do the work that we were purchasing from NSSEO?
They've been doing it.
Okay, thank you.
Library instruction, library aides at Ross and Sullivan are currently at 0.25 FTE with increased demand and level of services being provided by our LRC teachers. We're asking for a 0.25 increase in both of those 2 positions. We're looking at our school clerical support. You would think with everything going digital that would make things quicker. It seems as if they just keep adding more and more reporting and monitoring to the plate. So we're proposing an increase of 0.375 at Eisenhower, Ross, and Sullivan. We are already providing the IMRF benefits, but this would require additional health and dental and life insurance provision by making those positions full-time. That total increase would be a 1.125.
So the people there right now are part-time, they will go to.
Correct, they're 0.62. Well, we'll post the positions that way. The central office currently has an unused custodial position that we've sort of held again as a contingency. We'd like to utilize that 0.3, increase it by 0.2 to provide a 0.5 clerical assistant, really that supports the 3 other offices. Michelle does a fabulous job working as my executive assistant, and also then she helps Chris and Amy, and our district registrar helps, and our bookkeeper helps, and our accounts payable helps, but that again draws people away from their primary purpose. So this would be primarily somebody looking at our purchase orders, processing of grant paperwork, and reporting as well. We're looking at another shift of services to an in-house person. It would be no change in an FTE, but we would be creating a special education specialist who will focus on the area of speech and language pathologist supervision and coordination of services. That's currently something, again, we pay out of a purchase service to NSSEO. We would be looking to bring those responsibilities in-house with no change to FTE. And I did have an opportunity to meet with Joe Wade and Chief Bill Caponegro from Prospect Heights. We had a very good conversation. I felt we were very much in alignment with the goal and the intended purpose of a school resource officer. Thinking about that primarily as, again, a resource and a service to the families and the school community at large. That's a shared goal that Bill feels really strongly about. I know he's working on those arrangements and agreements with some of the other schools on the other side of town. The process for that is about a 6-month lead time. So we're not talking about making any decisions in the near future, other than with the direction from the board, we would begin to develop a memorandum of understanding that would articulate what those expectations are, what the ownership responsibilities are, what the costs would be. We are looking again at a proportionate share of that based upon the officer's time in district, as well as their hours and time outside of when the schools are closed. So I'd like to, again, keep that in as a recommendation that we continue to investigate that. There are, again, a pretty significant lead time on that process before we would get to anything specific. We'd be looking at potentially the earliest would be like a January start date. And at that point, then we would be able to know specifically who and what the specific costs would be. So that right now is still in a sort of a theoretical development phase, but with approval, we could move that forward.
Do you know, you may not know, does he look to his current staff to identify somebody, or does he look outside?
No, so it would be an existing officer, someone who is familiar with the community. They typically look at officers between years 2 and 5, but because they're so short-staffed as it is, until they have an officer identified and in place to take the place of that individual, they need them on patrol and doing other duties. So we would get someone who has a little bit more experience, who is better known in terms of the chief and the staff at the police department. They would offer that up and screen a pool of candidates from within their ranks that then they would present to us, and we would do the selection process and hiring as we would for any other staff member. And again, just to
just like without
sure.
saying yes or no to that,
Yeah.
like I don't feel like this is something that's like part of our normal staffing plan. Like this is a completely separate process, a completely separate decision.
It is, yeah.
I don't think it's like I don't think this should be part of this memo and part of like what we're talking about here tonight.
Okay. Yeah, I raised it only because we were talking staffing, but it's right. It's not presented as a staffing element.
Yeah.
I think we'd have to talk about funding stream. We would have to talk about sustainability. We'd have to look at the positions.
I think we're gonna have a vote to determine whether we are 100%. Like even your language here is that we're exploring this, right? That
Right.
there has not been a decision to say we are absolutely doing this.
Correct. Correct.
The only thing, I know you said we're keeping our eyes on this, that 4th grade number is really, like,
Yeah.
that red to, like, I think
Yeah.
we really need to, like, it's over our number.
Yeah.
I think it's important that we just really keep that.
Yep, it's right at the top, and
It feels
again,
like it's even over, right? Like it's at 25.6 and we say
Right.
25, like.
Right.
yeah,
That's the only thing that's really like glaring to me is that like,
right,
and I know it's still it's still March, but.
right.
When you have to make a decision there to.
Oh, we would make it in May or June. Once ideally, we'll have our enrollment occur in the month of April into May. Sullivan and Ross and Ike are usually in the lead in terms of parents being quick to register. So we're pretty well enrolled there. It's Mac that usually has to catch up a little bit with some reminders. But
challenge accepted.
Yeah.
Oh, look who's here!
Yeah.
Look who made it!
I think Brian and I could lead a
Yeah.
crusade about 6th graders enrolling on time.
But we
right?
should know, to answer your question, we should then have pretty firm enrollment numbers by the beginning of May to be able to know if we're coming in at that mark. What we've done when we've reached we're in that questionable range is we set a target. We say if the number hits X number of students, if we hit
154 puts us at.
Yeah, if we hit 150, then we will add another section or something to that effect. But we need to wait and see what those enrollment numbers actually come in at.
That's the only thing that's really.
No, right. That's why.
Well,
That's why you made it red.
That's why I highlighted it in red because
it's so
a concern. It's a concern, right?
Then just in the current plan, is someone moving up with the 4th graders in the current plan
from 4th to.
Because like right now there's a flip
Right.
from 7-6 to 6-7.
Right. So what?
But you're also losing 2 6th grade that need to go somewhere.
I'm sorry, but this is just in Sullivan. This is just in Sullivan.
So the process will be we would post anticipated vacancies. Internal candidates can apply. We consider and interview them first. That typically creates sort of a shuffle down to know who's interested in moving from one grade level to another. Are there other places we need to find homes for? And then, again, typically in April, we would bring an updated, now that the dominoes have shuffled, here's what somebody moved from 5th grade to 4th grade, so now we have a 5th grade vacancy or whatever it may be. And then after approval of the staffing plan, then we actually would begin to pursue getting final contracts on any new employees.
But we also have some retirees that are affecting these.
Correct.
Numbers too.
Correct. And so
in the table, right, that you kind of have the 64 for this year and then the 65 for next year. Is that 65? Is that counting the ESLs?
Yeah, that doesn't.
Because I think the math is just.
doesn't
I think you just got
work.
to fix the math on that table.
I agree. I
think it's 63. I think it's 65 this year and then 63 next year. But then I see what you're saying.
You're right.
Later
I didn't.
Then later on, that the ESLs technically don't count as core.
They don't count as core, but you're right. I did not edit that field. Sorry. That
That's
should
all
be
right.
63 total core teachers.
Gotcha. Okay,
And
thank
then
you.
Does that trickle down to your then retirement statement? Because I was having a hard time following that today at work. I'm like laying this all over the place.
Yeah.
So if we're saying all these positions need to be filled for next year, but we're saying we're having 2 less core teachers, and then if we look at the summary down below, I guess I was not following that.
So we're replacing all 5 of the retirees and the 2 core teachers from MacArthur that are being reduced in the staffing plan. We're being replaced by 2 ESL teachers, so it ends up being, those end up being a wash. The cost benefit, as 5 retirees come through, we see a total increase of FTE of 2.325, but because of the savings from a higher salary being replaced with a lower salary, we turn those savings, so to speak, back into the programming, and we actually see a total overall reduction of $34,000 of the current staffing plan to the next.
And technically, none of the increases in FTE are actually our core or classroom teachers, right? It's, I guess we add the 2 ESLs and then we have the half sale, but then it's library aides, clerical support, custodial, clerical support, right?
Behavior coach.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I guess our teachers are technically saying the same. We're losing 2 core and adding 2 of the full-time ESLs.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Because the core numbers are driven purely by sectioning and number of students. All of the other support staff services are driven by student need, program enhancement, program need. So they aren't tied to if class sizes go up or down. They may be, again, in the case of our behavioral coach, they may be in direct correlation to us being able to provide those services in-house rather than doing it as a purchase service. So this is, again, an information item, discussion item. Happy to chat through some of them in more detail. And we'll bring a more formal proposal back as an action item next month.
One of the things that we had last year was like it was like
the table,
the trending table or chart. I think that would be useful too, right? Because did you have that? Was that broken down by like core versus support too? I think that would be useful to kind of.
It showed all of the changes over time.
Yeah.
Yep, I can update that.
Because it just, I know that the projected will change, but like just the overall enrollment from 2020 till next year, right? That we're going from 1471 and just steadily decreasing, right? That we've lost. We essentially have a reduction in 80 or over 80 kids over the last 4 years. Oh, thank you. This is. You got a lot of juggling to do with.
Yes.
For core, right?
Yeah. That's why That's why we're going to move forward with anticipated, because it's going to take a while. We will have a lot of internal conversation to happen in the next few weeks. We hope to have all of those decisions internally made by before spring break.
Gotcha.
Just for life planning. Want to make sure that folks know what's going on and where they're hoping to be for next year, and then, like I said, we'll finalize that after the April board meeting.
And Don, just for information, you said that those get posted as anticipated. If no one takes you up on those offers, then there's the process of moving people.
If we needed to, I mean, that also begins the process of external candidates as well. So we'd start with internal, the process of honoring internal transfer requests, interviewing and selecting from that pool first, and then after spring break we would turn to external candidates. Okay.
Thanks.
Next item is an action item. Mrs. McPartland, you want to kick that off?
Sure. So as you are aware, we conducted a bid for the renewal of our landscaping services. This contract is a 3-year contract beginning in April. We received a number of bids, and the low bidder was selected. That's Hispano Lawn Maintenance and Landscaping Company. They are a new vendor for the district, and their prices represented a savings of about $10,000 a year. Mike has had a couple meetings already with Hispano and walked the premises. We've checked references, and they're good to go. So the total 3-year bid is right around $73,000. It was the annual bid was $23,650, and that's there's a 3% increase for years 2 and 3. Any questions on that? No.
Okay. Can I have a motion for this?
You know what? I just
Okay.
the Milo one. I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine.
For the 3-year contract on that one, $123,000 doesn't seem right. Unless do they have a huge escalator in there?
Let's see.
I'm sorry, I just saw that right
We're
now.
123,456.
Right, if
I
they're at
believe that's
26.9
I believe their
a year.
base bid is a typo, actually.
The base
Yeah.
bid of 26.9 is a type, because otherwise they should only be at 81,000. I mean, they're still not the lowest bid, but I don't know how formal this has to be for our records. But there seems to be something wrong unless they have a huge escalation
Yeah, no,
over years 2 and 3.
sorry, the base bid was 40,340.
Ooh.
Wow. Because that's who we have
So they should be at
currently.
the bottom of that
They
list.
should be at the bottom of the list.
Yeah, they should.
That Hispano, being based out of Joliet, is that a concern at
I
all?
know,
Like,
right? They're not even local.
I mean, I understand.
It wasn't for me. I mean, their references were really pretty solid.
Okay.
Yeah, they had great references, and they actually do work in northern Illinois,
Okay.
further up than us, so.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Can I have a motion?
Motion.
Okay.
All
Moved by Brent.
Second.
And seconded by Brian. Roll call, please.
Mr. Vadonis.
Yes.
Mrs. McLean.
Yes.
Mr. Nordmark.
Yes.
Mr. Novak.
Yes.
Mrs. Peters.
Yes.
Mrs. Bolinski.
Yes. Motion passed 6-0.
And the last item on the superintendent's report is an update on grants from Dr. Zayer.
Yes, we're going to go detail by detail and line by line. I'm just kidding. Just a quick overview of how the grants actually change, what we budget for when we start out in the beginning. Sometimes becomes a little bit different as we go through the school year, and that has to do with they give us a base amount, which is usually about 80% of what we will get in the future, and then districts have to apply for these grants, and sometimes they get them, sometimes they don't apply, and that all filters out to the rest of us if they don't apply. And so that's why you can never really totally know the actual amount when you're budget planning for the future, but you kind of have a good estimate. So this is just an update on how we have the original grant and what we have changed. And we changed that through the process of amendments.
Only comment I had was I think one of the cells is missing for the Title III bilingual.
Yeah, it's like 60,000.
And a couple other ones. At bare minimum, the one above it is not footed right in the amendment section. It's short by about $10,000, $12,000.
In
just
Title
just
II?
the total foot in the amendment to Title II. Yeah. I was looking. I'm like, there are blanks. How did we only go up that amount? And
You mean in the original one?
so
or
the
is it-
original foots
That's
properly, but the amendment total
Yeah.
doesn't foot properly.
Right, Amendment 1 for Title II, and then Amendment 1 for Title III.
Now I'm looking. I'm wondering if we only footed the bottom numbers and missed the 14, but I didn't check that.
I made a note. We'll go back and
Yeah.
update that.
I think the other ones are right. Yeah. That's a lot of grant writing.
Yes.
It is. It is.
Oh.
It's a lot. It is a lot, and it's they are not the easiest things to.
Yeah,
there's
there's
lots
some
of hoops
shoes
to jump
for
through.
somebody to step into.
Craig will be wonderful at this, and we're going to go through all of the different red tape and hoops that you have to jump through.
That's a lot of work.
Mhm.
Credit. That's a lot.
Amy, you know what Title IV for Amendment 1 also doesn't foot?
Oh, I thought there might be one more. Okay,
Yeah, there.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Sorry
you.
about that, guys.
We'll take a look at those.
Okay. Any more questions?
Thanks, Amy, for your work on that.
Okay. So next we have old business. Anybody have old business to bring up? Okay, then new business.
New business. On the April 4th election, we will have our new board identified, although they're all our returning members, as long as you get one vote. So at least go and vote for yourself. We will need to wait until the election is certified, which is typically 22 days after. Then we have until May 15th to seat the new board and go through that process of closing out this 2-year cycle and starting the next 2-year cycle. We had Saturday, April 29th on the books as a board admin workshop where we'll be collaborating around the strategic plan. I thought rather than schedule another meeting that we would tack on the reorganizational meeting that morning and then move right into the board admin strategic planning workshop, which has to happen during a meeting anyway.
That meeting, I'm sorry, I didn't have it in my calendar. What, it's from 8:30, is that what you said?
I would think 8:30 until 11:30 is probably perfect.
And then we were discussing like moving board meetings to different days.
Right.
That same meeting.
So we'll close
Okay.
out the first process is closing out the existing board. We'll elect a president pro tem, open the next meeting, and then at that meeting we'll set our meeting dates and times, elect the officers, and then set our calendar of dates for the year. So we'll have the opportunity to have that conversation at that time.
So folks should be thinking about what other evenings, I guess, work in your schedules.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yes.
And I'm thinking of just doing that here, that meeting here.
Okay.
Yeah. That makes sense. Okay. Any
Thank
other
you.
new business? Okay, then we do have an executive session tonight. So we need to adjourn to executive session for the purpose of negotiations and personnel, right?
Superintendent, yeah.
And there is no action following, so.
I motion to adjourn
Second.
for the purposes of negotiations and personnel and superintendent as presented
Okay.
on the consent agenda, whatever.
By Becky, seconded by Brent, did you? Okay.
Yep.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Kadanis?
Yes.
Mrs. McClaney?
Yes.
Mr. Nordmark?
Yes.
Mr. Novak?
Yes.
Mrs. Peters?
Yes.
Mrs. Bowinsky?
Yes. Motion passed.